Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me. Today, I'd like to discuss making life our practice. This video or podcast is really aimed at those of you who already have a regular meditation practice. But of course, for those of you who are aspiring to that, or you're curious about meditation or Buddhism, totally cool. Feel free to keep listening if you'd like. And so, primarily what I want to discuss is this element of how we sometimes compartmentalize things in our life. Right. So, of course, this can apply to anything, but here I'm going to apply it to, our formal meditation practice, what we do on the meditation cushion or seat that we work on in the morning or evening, and then the rest of our life and how these two things interact. So, of course, a formal meditation practice for most of us is an absolute necessity. In the traditional Buddhist path, there's pretty much no, lineage figure or important teaching out there that says, you don't need to do a formal meditation at all. You can just sort of forget it and just, get the full benefits. I've never heard that before. But of course, there's also the teaching that if we only leave it to the formal meditation, it's sort of like there's so many hours of our day and so many parts of our life that aren't being affected by the practice, right? And in order to understand how to make our life our meditation practice, or to make our life our Dharma practice, we also have to understand what this word practice, what it implies. Because a lot of people think of practice only as meditation. We're actually in Buddhism, we have lots of different kinds of practices. Some involve what looks like meditation, and some involve just critical thinking throughout the day, or opening to awareness throughout the day, or different kinds of ways of working with our perception, beliefs, and habitual patterns. And of course, this involves mindfulness towards our verbal and physical actions, right? More or less trying to avoid things that are harmful, trying to adopt things that are beneficial, getting more consistency in that, also getting more depth in what that means, because some of those things are more subtle as we travel the path. Some are not, right? Like we shouldn't harm others, we shouldn't steal from them, things like that are more obvious. And then there's more subtle things that happen as we practice and study the Dharma. But either way, this is all this is what practice means. Whatever opens us more to the true nature of reality, whatever opens us up more to what is causing suffering and what is going to remove those causes, what's going to allow us to live in a more fluid, open way, what's going to provide a path and a means towards awakening from a Buddhist perspective. So in order to do that, obviously, we need to cultivate some awareness, presence, as well as insight on the meditation cushion, as well as an open heart, just opening to our practice in a loving way and growing that loving connection, not only with ourselves, but with others, right? That all needs to be a part of it. And again, I'm saying it in a very general way. There's lots of specificity in there too. But then, of course, at some point, if we don't have a strategy or a plan in how to bring that into the day, if we're not working on that, our practice is going to be very limited. It's only going to affect us on the cushion. When we get up, we're going to forget. And obviously, we're going to fall back into patterns of how our afflictive emotions and thoughts play out, right? So the biggest thing we're up against is our strong and stubborn identities, right? And identities are when we've solidified certain emotional and habitual responses, certain beliefs, certain opinions around a sense of self. So these are going to be our most entrenched areas to work with. And therefore, I would advise we take a little bit more of a mid to long-term approach with those. But in the short term, we need to make a plan. We need to make some kind of a strategy for working with our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and reactions, right? The easiest one to probably start with is working with our reactions. So in basic mindfulness practice, we learn to create space. We learn to provide that in the formal meditation, and then we start to practice that in short doses throughout the day. And I'll give an example of what I mean by space. Another way I talk about this sometimes is basically ways to slow down our reaction. Because for most of us, when we get angry, when we get upset, or when we're slightly annoyed, it's pretty quick to have some kind of a reaction that can be harmful to ourselves or another person. So when we slow down that reaction, or when we create or open up more space in that reaction, it gives us more time. It gives us more time to choose a skillful direction, right? And so, of course, that's coming from formal meditation, meaning we've cultivated that formally on the cushion. But we need to challenge ourselves. We need to attempt to bring that into the day, where most of our reactions happen, right? They don't, of course, they can happen in formal meditation, but I often find they happen in relationships in the world. That means relationships to people. That also just means relationships to myself, my own emotions, as well as just reactions to different perceptions I'm having. And these don't have to be that profound. It could just be a reaction to the weather, right? And so how do I work with that and open up more space, or slow down the experience so I can have more of a healthy choice in that? So practice means that also, right? I don't think we meditate in general to get good at meditation. We meditate in order to have more skill of mindful awareness, to have more skill in how we want to conduct ourselves through body, speech, and mind, right? I said that already, but I'm just repeating it in a different way here. And then, of course, we're trying to unwind the whole package itself that forms very, very rigid and entrenched identities of who we are and what we think the world is. So we're trying to open up questions about these. So practice also includes that. So in Buddha Dharma, we have kind of two contexts for different kinds of methods of meditation. And we have the context of shamatha, or cultivating meditative awareness. And we have the context of vipassana, or cultivating insight. In that second category, mostly I've been talking about the first category of shamatha so far, and different practices and approaches we can try during the day. But in that second category of insight, or insight meditation, this is when we're opening up questions. This is when we're really opening up a process of more curiosity, less fixation. We're trying to understand why we get rigid around things. We're trying to open up and see what that actually is, right? And there's different kinds of insight, but eventually we want to have some kind of, or we want to trigger, or we want to practice a way to open up this perspective that everything we experience and or believe and or think is true, as it is. So this is where we really start to approach genuine freedom. This is where we start to practice things that may open up that rigidity and therefore offer us more freedom in our life. And of course, from a Buddhist perspective, move us closer towards what we call awakening, right? So in this sense, it's important how we approach life, right? It's important that we not only think of our Dharma practice or meditation practice as this exclusive thing we do in a certain time of day in a certain place. In this sense, we become a student of life. Actually, I've heard a Buddhist teacher say that before, that Buddhism is the path, or the path of making life your practice, of essentially making life your path, right? And again, it sounds silly because obviously life is our path, but not a lot of us are conscious of that. So what's it like to consciously become a participant in our life, in both how we project what our life is and who we are and others are, and also questioning that projection. So that's part of, I think, when we really get into this, when we get serious about our spiritual path and Dharma practice. And of course, this is an approach I would say even meditators who aren't Buddhist can take. You can benefit from the Buddha Dharma in this way, right? And this approach is really becoming a student of life. It's becoming, interested in looking at things, not interested in sort of sticking to rigidity and, not asking questions and, being a follower. This is the total opposite of that. This is one thing I really love about traditional Buddhism, which is sort of maybe paradoxical to those of you or certain people who may, question whether, Buddhism is a religion or not, or sort of get frustrated with it. But for me, Buddhism has been a path to becoming more open to life, more open to myself, open to thoughts, not to believing more in something, but to using a structured path to make life my practice, to become interested in that. And again, I'm not saying I'm successful at that. Actually, I don't even know if you can succeed at that. It'd sort of be silly to say you can succeed at making life your practice. It's just something we try. It's just something we do. It's just something we go for because we see nothing else really works. Nothing else is really, offering some kind of lasting happiness. Sure, we can get lots of temporary happiness, but at some point we get exhausted with that and we think, what is this? How can I use this life in the best way? So why not, become a seeker in our life, become really interested in gaining the tools through meditation to apply to the rest of our day, even to the nighttime. In Tibetan Buddhism, for instance, we have practices for, working with dreams, for working with the night. And a lot of people think those are super esoteric. I think they're quite practical. They're just ways for working with the mind and learning about the mind and opening up and working with the projections of mind in the nighttime. Because why not? We're asleep for 6 to 8 hours every day. So why not use that time? But before that, I would recommend just using the daytime. Right? Get good at that. So anyways, just some thoughts here. I hope this is helpful. I'd love to hear, your thoughts on how you make life your practice. If you're watching on YouTube, just comment here. If you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, or on YouTube podcasts, let me know. Venture to my website, scotttusa.com. Leave me a comment there. Just reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Take care.